After the shootout, a cowboy was given an Apache woman, but he made a different choice. The morning sun rose slowly over the small frontier town of Red Mesa. The streets were quiet save for the soft creak of wooden signs swaying in the light breeze, and the distant clatter of horses' hooves on the dusty road. Most townspeople were still inside their homes, keeping out of the morning chill, but a tension lingered in the air. Word had spread that a band of outlaws had been seen nearby, and fear had settled over the town like a heavy fog. Jack Harper, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes sharp as a hawk, stood outside the livery stable, checking his rifle. He had earned a reputation over the years as a cowboy who could handle any danger that came his way. Jack was not a man who sought trouble, but trouble seemed to find him anyway. His horse, a strong black stallion named Midnight, pawed at the ground impatiently, sensing the rising tension in the town. Jack tightened the straps on his saddle, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. He remembered why he had come to Red Mesa. The town was small but important, a waypoint for traders and travelers moving across the plains. The sheriff had written him asking for help to deal with a group of outlaws who had been terrorizing nearby settlements. Jack had agreed to come, not for reward, but because he could not stand by and watch innocent people suffer. The moral compass he carried was as firm as the steel of his rifle, guiding his every decision. By mid-morning, the quiet of the town was shattered. A cloud of dust appeared on the horizon, and soon the figures of men on horseback emerged, riding with reckless speed and waving guns in the air. The outlaws had come, and their eyes gleamed with greed and malice. The townspeople, who had been peeking from behind curtains and shuttered windows, hurried to lock doors and hide their children. Panic spread like wildfire, and a few brave souls ran to warn the sheriff. Jack did not hesitate. He mounted Midnight and rode toward the town square, positioning himself where he could see the outlaws clearly. His movements were calm but deliberate, betraying none of the tension that gripped him. He knew that one wrong move could mean death, not just for himself, but for the people he had sworn to protect. The outlaws laughed and shouted, confident that they could take control of the town with ease. The shootout began suddenly. A bullet whizzed past Jack's head, kicking up dust as it struck the wooden fence behind him. Jack fired in return, his aim precise. Every shot counted. He could see the fear in the eyes of the outlaws, who had underestimated the skill of the cowboy who now faced them. They had thought this town would be an easy target, but Jack was a man who had spent years surviving in the harshest conditions the plains could offer. His instincts were sharp, and his focus unbreakable. The townspeople watched in awe as Jack moved with unmatched precision. He dodged bullets and returned fire, protecting anyone who stepped into danger. Children peeked from windows, gripping their mothers' skirts, and the adults whispered prayers under their breath. The sound of gunfire echoed through the narrow streets, mingling with the frantic shouts of the outlaws. Jack did not allow panic to control him. He remained calm, thinking several steps ahead, using the town's buildings and alleyways to his advantage. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, the tide of the battle began to turn. Jack's skill and courage demoralized the outlaws, and one by one, they began to flee. Some dropped their weapons and surrendered, realizing that their plan had failed. Others attempted to escape on horseback, but Jack and a few brave townsmen managed to intercept them. By the time the smoke cleared, the town was safe, and the outlaws were either captured or had fled into the open plains, defeated. The townspeople emerged cautiously from their hiding places. Relief washed over them, and they gathered around Jack, cheering and clapping. The sheriff, a stern but fair man named Tom Reynolds, approached Jack with gratitude shining in his eyes. "You saved this town, Harper," he said. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Jack nodded quietly, acknowledging the praise but saying little. For him, the real reward was knowing that no innocent person had been harmed. News of Jack's bravery spread quickly through Red Mesa. People spoke of his courage in hushed, reverent tones, recounting how he had faced danger head-on without hesitation. The town elders decided to honor Jack in a traditional ceremony, wanting to show their gratitude in a way that reflected the customs of both the settlers and the nearby Apache tribe. It was during this meeting that Jack first heard of the unusual reward. The town leaders had arranged to give him an Apache woman named Ayana as a gesture of respect and gratitude. Jack listened quietly, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He had heard of such practices before, where brave men were rewarded for heroism. But this was different. Ayana was not a possession or an object. She was a person with her own thoughts, feelings, and pride. Jack respected the Apache people and their customs, but he knew that accepting someone as a reward would be wrong. Still, he remained polite, nodding respectfully to the elders and the tribe representatives, not wanting to insult anyone while he considered his decision. Later that evening, Jack rode to the edge of the town, sitting silently by the river that ran through the plains. The water reflected the fiery colors of the sunset, and he allowed himself a moment of contemplation. He thought about the shootout, about the fear he had seen in the eyes of children and townspeople, and about the responsibility he carried. The idea of Ayana as a reward did not sit well with him, no matter how well-intentioned the gesture. Jack had always lived by a personal code of honor, and this situation challenged him in a way he had never faced before. As night fell, Jack heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. It was Ayana herself, walking with confidence and dignity. She had been told of the offer, and now she wanted to speak with the man whose actions had saved the town. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and full of a quiet strength that immediately impressed Jack. She did not speak in a way that suggested she expected to be claimed or controlled. Instead, she approached with a calm curiosity, wanting to understand the man who had faced such danger. "Jack Harper," she said softly, her voice steady. "I've heard what you did today. The town speaks of your courage." Jack looked at her, studying her face, trying to understand the person behind the story he had heard. "I didn't do it for praise," he said. "I just did what I had to do. People's lives are more important than anything else." Ayana nodded, sensing the honesty in his words. "And yet, they wish to reward you with me. They think that is fitting." She paused, looking down at the river before returning her gaze to him. "Do you believe it is?" Jack shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "A reward is meant to honor someone's action, not take away another person's freedom. You deserve the right to choose your own path." Ayana studied him for a long moment, then smiled faintly. It was a smile that held both approval and a recognition of shared values. "Then we think alike," she said. "Perhaps this is the beginning of understanding, not ownership." That night, as the town celebrated Jack's heroism with music, laughter, and stories of the shootout, Jack and Ayana sat quietly apart, talking about their lives, their values, and the harsh realities of the frontier. Jack realized that heroism was not measured by fame or recognition, but by the choices one made when faced with difficult situations. Ayana, in turn, saw that not all settlers lacked respect for her people, and that courage could be more than just bravery with a gun. It could also be moral strength. By the time the stars appeared over Red Mesa, Jack Harper had made an unspoken decision. He would honor the Apache woman, not by accepting her as a reward, but by respecting her as a person. The town might not understand, and some might even be angry, but Jack's conscience was clear. The true victory of the day was not in the defeat of the outlaws, but in the courage to do what was right, even when it was difficult. And so the first chapter of their story ended, with the cowboy sitting by the river, the sound of water flowing softly beside him, and a sense of quiet anticipation in the air. The plains were wide and endless, full of challenges and choices yet to come. But for now, Jack knew that the most important victory was the one he had already achieved, staying true to himself and showing respect for another human being, no matter the expectations of the world around him. After the chaos of the shootout had settled, the town of Red Mesa returned to its usual rhythm, though the memory of the day's events lingered in the air like dust after a storm. Jack Harper continued to help the townspeople, repairing fences, checking on injured animals, and ensuring that the outlaws who had been captured were safely turned over to the sheriff. But in the back of his mind, he could not stop thinking about Ayana. She was not just a figure in a story or a reward to be offered. She was a person, intelligent and strong, with her own hopes and beliefs. Ayana had spent the past day observing the town quietly. She noticed the nervous glances of the townspeople and the careful way they treated Jack. It was clear to her that he was respected, not only for his skill with a gun, but also for his fairness and honesty. She had lived much of her life among her Apache people, where respect was earned through deeds and character, not through titles or fear. From the moment she first saw Jack, she sensed a rare quality in him, one that set him apart from many men she had met. Jack decided to visit the Apache camp near the edge of the plains to speak with Ayanna properly. He rode through the open fields, the wind blowing against his face, thinking about what he wanted to say. He did not want to offend her or her people. He wanted to communicate that he had no intention of treating her as a reward or a possession. He had seen the pride in her eyes when they first met, and he wanted to honor that. When he arrived at the camp, Ayanna was already there, tending to small tasks among her family and community. She greeted him with a quiet nod, her eyes steady and curious. "You have come," she said simply. "I wanted to speak with you," Jack replied. "I need you to understand something about the way people in the town see this, and about my choice." Ayanna tilted her head slightly, listening carefully. She understood quickly that this man did not speak lightly. "Go on," she said, her voice calm but firm. Jack explained how the town leaders and elders had wanted to honor his bravery, but he could not accept that their idea of a reward included her. He spoke about his belief that a person's freedom and dignity could never be a gift to someone else, no matter how well-intentioned. "You are not a reward," he said quietly. "You are a person, and your choices belong to you alone."
Ayanna's expression softened slightly, though her pride remained intact. She appreciated his honesty and his courage to speak in this way.
Many men would have accepted the reward without a second thought, but Jack had thought about more than just the expectations of the town. "I can see that you are sincere," she said. "It is rare to meet someone who values respect over recognition." They spent hours walking along the edge of the camp, talking about their lives. Jack shared stories of the frontier, of long rides through the plains, and the challenges he had faced as a cowboy. He spoke of moments of danger, but also of times when he had seen kindness and courage from unexpected people. Ayanna in turn shared stories of her Apache heritage, her family and the traditions she held dear. She spoke of lessons taught by her elders, of the importance of living in harmony with the land, and of the strength found in community. Through their conversation, Jack began to understand the depth of the challenges Ayanna and her people had faced. He realized that the outlaws who had threatened Red Mesa were only a small part of a much larger world of injustice and struggle. He felt a growing respect for Ayanna's resilience and intelligence. She was not someone to be protected or controlled. She was someone to learn from and stand beside. The town, meanwhile, began to notice Jack's frequent visits to the camp. Some townspeople whispered among themselves, confused or even disapproving of his choice to interact with Ayanna in this way. They had expected him to accept the gift and claim her as a sign of his heroism, but Jack remained unaffected by their opinions, focused instead on doing what he knew was right. He wanted to ensure that both the town and the Apache community could coexist peacefully, without anyone being forced into situations against their will. Over the next few days, Jack and Ayanna spent more time together. They helped with daily chores, repaired fences along the boundary between the town and the camp, and shared meals under the open sky. Jack noticed how skilled Ayanna was with her hands, how she could work with tools, tend to animals, and teach younger children with patience and clarity. She, in turn, noticed Jack's calm demeanor, his sense of fairness, and the way he treated people with dignity, no matter who they were. Their bond grew not out of obligation, but from mutual respect and understanding. Jack learned that courage was not only about standing in a shootout, but also about standing by one's principles. Ayanna learned that some outsiders could act with integrity, valuing honor and justice over recognition or reward. Slowly, a foundation of trust formed between them, one that would later guide their choices in even more challenging situations. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a section of fence along the plains, a group of townspeople arrived. They had come to speak with Jack, wanting to understand his decision. Some were curious, others judgmental. "Jack," one of the men said, "why do you spend so much time with her?" "Aren't you supposed to take her as a reward?" Jack looked the man in the eye, calm but firm. She is not a reward. She is a person. I will not accept anything that takes away someone's freedom. That is not honor. That is not courage. True respect comes from giving people the right to choose for themselves. The townspeople were silent, unsure how to respond. Jack's words carried weight, even if they were difficult for some to accept. Ayanna, standing beside him, nodded slightly. Her quiet strength spoke louder than any words, and the group eventually left, still murmuring, but with a new understanding of the situation. Evenings were spent around the campfire, where Jack and Ayanna shared stories and thoughts under the wide, starlit sky. They spoke of dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. Ayanna told Jack about the challenges of preserving her culture in a changing world, and Jack shared his own reflections on the frontier life he had lived. The fire crackled and sparks danced into the night, creating a quiet, intimate space where judgment and expectation could not reach them. One night, as the wind whispered across the plains, Ayanna spoke of the difficult position she found herself in. "I know the town means well," she said softly, "but I do not want to be seen as a prize or a reward. My life is my own. I cannot be claimed for anyone's glory." Jack listened carefully, understanding the depth of her feelings. "You are right," he said. "And I want to stand by that. You deserve to make your own choices." That is the only way we can truly respect each other. Their conversation marked a turning point. Jack realized that his role was not to protect or control Ayanna, but to support and respect her. Ayanna realized that she could trust this man who had proven his courage not only in a gunfight but in the moral choices he made afterward. The partnership that formed between them was unusual for the time, yet it was rooted in principles stronger than fear, stronger than expectation, and stronger than tradition. As days passed, Jack's respect for Ayanna grew deeper. He admired her determination, her wisdom, and the way she carried herself with dignity. He saw the strength in her eyes, a strength that had been honed through experiences he could hardly imagine. For Ayanna, Jack became a symbol of integrity, a man who acted with courage in both physical and moral battles. The town slowly began to notice the change. Some people who had doubted Jack's decision began to see the value in his actions. They realized that bravery was not only in fighting enemies, but also in making the right choices when faced with difficult situations. Jack's example taught them that respect, fairness, and honor were as important as courage with a gun. By the end of the second week, a sense of balance had been restored. Jack and Ayanna continued their work together, building trust and understanding between the town and the Apache community. The foundation of respect they had created would guide them in the challenges ahead, as both communities began to see that cooperation and mutual recognition were stronger than fear and prejudice. As the sun set on another long day, Jack and Ayanna stood at the edge of the plains, looking out over the horizon. The wind carried the scent of sage and earth, and the colors of the sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange, pink, and gold. "We are not bound by expectation," Jack said quietly. "We can choose our own paths, even when others think they know what is right." Ayanna nodded, a small smile on her face, and in that choice we find true freedom. For the first time since the shootout, both of them felt a sense of peace. They knew that the days ahead would bring new challenges, but they also knew that they would face them with integrity, courage, and mutual respect. Their story was only beginning, but the lessons they had learned together would guide them for a lifetime. Days passed in Red Mesa, but the quiet that had followed the shootout began to feel uneasy. The townspeople were divided. Some admired Jack Harper's courage and the moral choice he had made respecting Ayanna as a person rather than a reward. Others were unsettled, whispering that he had refused the town's gift and brought dishonor to their traditions. The balance between gratitude and expectation had started to tilt toward tension. Jack knew that sooner or later he would have to confront the consequences of his decision. He spent his mornings helping both the town and the Apache community. He repaired fences, guided travelers, and mediated small disputes. He did this quietly, without seeking recognition. Ayanna, meanwhile, continued her work with her people, teaching children, tending to daily chores, and ensuring that her family and community were safe. Though their days were busy, Jack and Ayana made time to meet, sharing thoughts and observations. Their conversations had become deeper, filled with reflection, lessons learned, and a mutual understanding that bridged the gap between their worlds. One afternoon, a group of townspeople gathered near the center of town. They were clearly upset and had come to confront Jack about his decision. The leader of the group, a man named Henry Cooper, stepped forward, his face red with frustration. "Jack," he said sharply, "we gave you a gift. We honored your bravery, and you turned it down." "Why? Don't you see how this makes the town look?" Jack looked at him calmly.
"I see it clearly," he said. "I do not reject the town or its gratitude."
"But Ayana is not a reward. She has her own life, her own freedom, and I will not take that from her. That is not bravery, nor is it honor. True courage is knowing the right choice and acting on it, even when it is hard." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some nodded slowly, considering his words. Others frowned and crossed their arms, unwilling to accept a challenge to tradition. Jack stood tall, meeting their gaze without fear. "We can honor heroism in many ways," he continued, "but respect for another person should always come first. That is the choice I make." At that moment, Ayana stepped forward. Her presence was quiet, but commanding, and all eyes turned to her. "Jack speaks the truth," she said firmly.
"I am not an object, and I will not be claimed as one."
"If you honor bravery, then honor the right choice as well. That means respecting my freedom and my voice." The crowd fell silent. Some were shocked that she spoke so boldly. Others were impressed by her courage. Jack and Ayana stood together, not as a hero and a reward, but as equals. Two people who had chosen integrity over convenience, morality over expectation. Despite their calm and reasoned words, the situation was tense. Not everyone in the town could understand such a choice. There were whispers of disapproval, and a few townspeople muttered that Jack was challenging tradition and defying social norms. It was a delicate balance. The town needed him for guidance, protection, and leadership, but his moral stance placed him in opposition to long-held expectations. The next day, the tension became more personal. Henry Cooper and a few other men came to Jack while he was helping repair a section of the fence near the Apache camp. "You are making trouble, Harper," Henry said harshly. "By refusing the gift, you are dishonoring us all. Some of us think the town should reconsider your place here. Maybe you are not the hero you believe yourself to be." Jack paused and looked at him steadily. "I am not here to satisfy expectations or tradition," he said firmly. "I am here to do what is right. If standing for what is right makes me unpopular, then so be it. I will not compromise my principles to please anyone." Henry's face flushed with anger, but before he could reply, Ayana stepped forward. "Jack is right," she said clearly. "You may not understand it now, but true respect comes from honor and fairness. He is not defying the town, he is guiding it to something better." Henry hesitated, clearly unsettled by her words and the strength in her eyes. Finally, he stepped back, muttering something under his breath, and left. Jack and Ayana watched him go, knowing that the road ahead would still be difficult, but also feeling stronger together. The days turned into weeks, and Jack and Ayana's bond continued to deepen. They worked side by side, not only repairing fences and helping the town, but also bridging gaps between the settlers and the Apache community. Jack began to see the subtle ways that prejudice had affected the town, and he made it his mission to encourage understanding and cooperation. Ayana, in turn, appreciated the way Jack treated her people with dignity, recognizing that he did not see them as outsiders or inferiors, but as equals. One afternoon, a traveler arrived in Red Mesa with troubling news. A group of outlaws had been spotted near the neighboring plains, threatening settlements further along the route. The town faced a potential danger, and many looked to Jack for guidance. He knew that the situation required careful planning, not just for defense, but also for diplomacy, as the Apache people and settlers would both be affected. Jack called a meeting with the town leaders and Ayana's elders. Together they discussed strategies for protection and cooperation. Jack emphasized that everyone's safety was paramount, but he also stressed the importance of fairness and respect for all people involved. He was careful to ensure that the Apache community's voice was heard, showing that leadership required not just courage, but wisdom and moral clarity. The planning sessions revealed the true challenge of leadership. Some settlers were unwilling to cooperate fully with the Apache community, fearing that it would compromise their control or traditions. Others were supportive but unsure how to act. Jack and Ayanna worked tirelessly to mediate, using patience and logic to guide the town toward consensus. Their collaboration became a model of cooperation, demonstrating that even in difficult times, principles and respect could guide action effectively. Meanwhile, Ayanna shared more of her life experiences with Jack. She spoke of the hardships her people had faced, of being misunderstood or treated unfairly by outsiders, and of the strength that had been passed down through generations. Jack listened carefully, absorbing her words and realizing the depth of knowledge and wisdom she carried. It was clear that their bond was no longer just about moral decisions. It had become a partnership built on mutual understanding and trust. Despite their growing influence, challenges persisted. A few townspeople continued to criticize Jack, whispering doubts about his decisions and questioning his judgment. At times, Jack felt the weight of these criticisms, knowing that standing for what was right could be lonely. But Ayanna's presence and support strengthened him, reminding him that true courage was not about popularity, but about integrity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack and Ayanna walked along the riverbank. The water reflected the orange and pink hues of the sky, and the air was filled with the soft sound of the wind through the grass. "Do you ever worry about the people who do not understand our choices?" Ayanna asked quietly. Jack shook his head. "I worry about them, but I cannot let fear of judgment control my actions. If we do what is right, even when it is hard, we create something stronger than fear or expectation. That is what matters." Ayanna smiled, a mixture of pride and admiration in her expression. "You have taught me much, Jack," she said. "Not just about courage, but about honor, respect, and the importance of standing firm. I see now that these principles can change hearts and minds, even in a place where tradition is strong." Their conversation was interrupted by a messenger arriving from the neighboring settlement. The news was urgent. The outlaws had begun moving closer, and immediate action was required. Jack and Ayanna returned to the town, ready to coordinate the response. Their plan involved not just defending the town but also ensuring the safety of both settlers and the Apache community. Jack's leadership, tempered by Ayanna's insight, became critical in preparing everyone for the coming threat. The tension in the town was palpable. People worked side by side under Jack's guidance, setting up defenses, creating safe passages, and preparing for the possibility of conflict. Ayanna helped organize the Apache community, ensuring that their traditions and safety were respected while contributing to the town's efforts. The collaboration, though challenging, began to build a sense of unity and shared purpose. Through these efforts, Jack's reputation began to evolve. He was no longer seen merely as a hero who had survived a shootout. He was now recognized as a leader who could act with both courage and moral clarity. Ayanna's presence reinforced this, showing the town that true strength included respect, wisdom, and partnership. Slowly, even some of the critics began to see the value in his choices, understanding that leadership required more than bravery with a gun. It required empathy, fairness, and integrity.
As night fell, Jack and Ayanna stood together, looking out over the plains.
The moon cast a silver glow on the landscape, and the stars twinkled above like distant fires.
"Whatever happens next," Jack said quietly, "we face it together, with the right choice guiding us."
Ayanna nodded, feeling a sense of quiet determination.
"We cannot control what others think," she said, "but we can stand firm in what we know is right. That is the true test of courage." At that moment, both of them understood that the challenges ahead would test not only their physical strength but also their principles. Their bond had been forged through shared values, and it would be that bond that carried them forward. The town, the Apache community, and even the skeptics would soon witness the power of integrity, respect, and courage in action. The tension in Red Mesa reached its peak as the days passed. Word had come that the outlaws, who had terrorized neighboring settlements, were moving closer. The town and the Apache community had prepared, guided by Jack Harper's leadership and Ayana's insight. Both communities had worked side by side, a partnership born of respect and mutual understanding rather than obligation or tradition. It was a strange sight for some townspeople, but it reflected a new way of thinking, one in which courage and morality were more important than old expectations. Jack rode along the town's edge in the early morning, checking on the preparations. The fences had been strengthened, lookouts stationed, and safe paths cleared for women, children, and the elderly. The Apache community had contributed quietly but effectively, offering guidance about the land, warning of potential ambush points, and providing resources from their own supplies. Jack felt a quiet satisfaction as he saw how well everyone had worked together, yet he remained cautious. He knew the outlaws were dangerous and unpredictable. Ayana rode beside him, her posture calm but alert. She had become a trusted advisor to Jack, offering insights not only about the land but also about the people. "They will likely try to take the southern route," she said softly, pointing toward a narrow valley bordered by cliffs. "It is the easiest path for their horses, but also the most exposed. We can use that to our advantage." Jack nodded, appreciating her sharp mind. "We will position lookouts there and create a barrier. We need to guide them into the open where we can control the outcome without unnecessary harm." As the sun climbed higher, the distant sound of hooves echoed across the plains. The outlaws were approaching. Jack and Ayana quickly coordinated the town's defense, positioning men and women behind barricades and along the safer routes. Despite the potential danger, Jack remained calm, his focus unwavering. The townspeople, inspired by his leadership and Ayana's guidance, followed his instructions with determination. Fear was still present, but it was tempered by preparation and trust. The outlaws arrived in the valley just as Ayana had predicted. They rode in with confidence, believing they could intimidate the town into submission. But Jack's careful planning became evident immediately. Barriers forced the outlaws into narrow spaces, where their numbers counted for less. Lookouts warned of every move, and townspeople stood ready, armed but composed. Jack and Ayana moved among the defenders, offering instructions, encouragement, and calm presence. The standoff lasted for hours. The outlaws tried different tactics to break through, but Jack anticipated each move. He understood that true strength was not in recklessness, but in strategy, preparation, and the courage to face danger without fear. Ayana's knowledge of the terrain gave the town an advantage, allowing them to avoid direct conflict whenever possible, while guiding the outlaws away from vulnerable areas. During a brief lull in the action, Jack took a moment to speak with Ayana. "We've come far," he said quietly, scanning the plains for movement. "Not just in preparing the town, but in showing that courage and respect can change the way people think." Ayana smiled faintly, the sun casting a golden glow on her face. "We've shown them that strength is more than weapons and force," she said. "It's about choices, fairness, and working together. That is the legacy we leave."
As the day wore on, the outlaws began to realize that their intimidation tactics were failing.
They could not break the town's defense, nor could they divide the settlers and the Apache community. Frustration grew among them, and some began to retreat, realizing that the fight was not worth the risk. Jack and Ayana remained vigilant, ensuring that the retreat was safe and that no innocent lives were threatened in the process. By evening, the threat had been neutralized. The outlaws had been forced to retreat, leaving Red Mesa unharmed. The townspeople emerged cautiously from their positions, cheering quietly as they saw the success of their defense. Jack and Ayana stood together, exhausted but proud, knowing that the real victory was not in the confrontation itself, but in how they had handled it. With respect, preparation, and integrity, the town leaders approached Jack and Ayana, gratitude evident on their faces. "Harper, you have not only protected the town, but you have shown us a new way to think," said Sheriff Reynolds. "And Ayana, your guidance was invaluable." "We owe you both our thanks." Jack shook his head slightly. "It is not thanks I seek," he said.
It is understanding.
The true reward is knowing that we did the right thing for everyone involved, not just ourselves. Ayana looked at Jack, her eyes reflecting pride and warmth. And in that choice, we have earned respect, not through force or expectation, but through fairness and courage. The townspeople slowly began to accept the new way of thinking. Some were still cautious, hesitant to change old habits, but many had seen the value of Jack and Ayana's approach. Cooperation, mutual respect, and courage in action had won the day, and even skeptics could not deny the results. In the following days, Jack and Ayana worked to solidify the positive changes. They helped settle disputes, encouraged dialogue between the town and the Apache community, and organized joint projects that strengthened the bonds between them. Fences were repaired together, livestock shared carefully, and children from both communities played under the watchful eyes of adults who now respected each other. Jack reflected on how far they had come since the shootout. What had begun as a moment of danger and fear had transformed into a lesson of morality, courage, and partnership. Ayana had become not just an advisor, but a friend, an equal, and a partner in shaping a stronger, fairer community. Their journey had not been easy, but it had shown the power of standing by principles, even when it challenged tradition and expectation. One evening, Jack and Ayana sat by the river where they had first spoken weeks earlier. The water reflected the silver light of the moon, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the plains, rustling grass, distant hooves, and the occasional call of a bird settling for the night. "We have done what we can," Jack said quietly. "The town has learned, the community has learned, and we have done our part." Ayana nodded, "And yet the lessons will continue. Courage, respect, and understanding are things people must practice every day. We have started something, but it is up to them to continue it." Jack smiled faintly. "Then we have left them with a foundation. That is all anyone can do." As the night deepened, they both felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The danger had passed, but the real victory was in the moral and social changes they had helped inspire. They had faced fear, challenged expectation, and stood firm in their principles. Together they had shown that true heroism was measured not by force alone, but by integrity, respect, and the courage to do what is right. In the weeks that followed, Red Mesa became a different town. Cooperation between the settlers and the Apache community became stronger, and mutual respect guided their interactions. Jack Harper was recognized not just as a brave cowboy, but as a man of honor, whose actions had changed minds and hearts. Ayana's wisdom and courage became known and appreciated, reinforcing her people's dignity and influence within the town. Eventually, Jack and Ayana stood together in front of the town, speaking to both settlers and Apache alike. "We face many challenges in life," Jack said, "but the measure of our courage is not only in the battles we fight, but in the choices we make every day. Respect, fairness, and integrity are what make a community strong. We must remember that always," Ayana added. "And in standing together, we create a future where strength is defined not by fear or domination, but by partnership and understanding. That is the legacy we leave behind." The town listened in quiet reverence. Even those who had once doubted their choices nodded in agreement. It was clear that Jack and Ayana's actions had not only protected Red Mesa from danger, but had created a lasting impact on the hearts and minds of its people. As the sun set over the plains, casting warm colors across the town, Jack and Ayana looked out toward the horizon. They knew challenges would continue to come, as they always had in the frontier, but they were confident in their principles, their partnership, and the foundation they had built. Together, they had faced danger, defied expectation, and chosen integrity over convenience. Together, they had created something lasting. The town of Red Mesa slept that night with a sense of peace. The outlaws were gone, the Apache community was respected, and the settlers had learned the value of courage, morality, and cooperation. Jack and Ayana, sitting quietly under the stars, knew that their story was one of heroism, not in battle alone, but in the choices that defined character and shaped the future. And so, the cowboy who could have taken a reward chose a different path, and in doing so, created a legacy that would be remembered long after the dust settled on the plains. He and Ayana had shown that true strength lay not in possession or expectation, but in respect, integrity, and the courage to always do what was right.